So hello all. I'm here to talk about our cyber infrastructure professional internship program. Talk today is going to focus on our goals, our methods, and results. We'll have time for questions at the end. There's a large number of slides, and I've set up the slide deck so that it should be useful even if I'm not actually presenting it. So I will talk about things that aren't on the slide, so there's value add, but the slide set itself should be helpful if you need to find information. This program, as a result of myself, Dr. Volodymyr Kindychenko, Vlad, and Dr. Luisa Rosu from U of I. Vlad and I are the PI and co-PI, and then Dr. Rosu is our external evaluator. All right, click and let's see. So I've been asked to include what we would refer to lovingly in the military as I love me slides. And so we've got some information about myself and my colleagues. What's interesting and useful to note here is that I spent 13 years in the military before entering academia. And that is an interesting and useful source of information and part of the reason why we've established this program and the way we operate it. Nothing exciting about being a military veteran, it's just it brings a different perspective than some of the traditional academia. For this program, Vlad is a professor at the university. He teaches classes on campus and remotely. He works with our R&D lab. He has several different grants and awards. We're working on one called HAL for an advanced AI system, and he has many publications. For our project, it was helpful to tie myself and Vlad together with a good working relationship because he will bring a professional educator aspect and I will bring a military training aspect. So that combination seems to have worked well for the program. In order to get the grant, we said that we would have an external evaluator, and we were very fortunate that the U of I campus has such a service through iSTEM, and Dr. Rosu was particularly helpful in getting us to have good annual feedback with surveys of our participants before they start and at the end when they finish, so we could track progress and get some professional feedback. Okay, so the goals that we have. We had some goals from the National Science Foundation when we put our proposal out for their solicitation. And then we had our own goals for this program that we had talked about even before we applied for the grant. The solicitation is from the Office of Advanced Cyber Infrastructure, and they had recognized for quite a while that there's just not enough professionals who can support cyber infrastructure at a level that does HPC and big data. And so they're looking for ways to increase the pool of people that had experience and knowledge in those areas. Fortunately, or unfortunately, the programs that they have also have a goal of expanding those methods. So anything that was granted would potentially have to be capable of being used elsewhere. It couldn't be just a single site solution. So one of the things we've always focused on is, could this methodology, could our programs, could our materials be disseminated? So for us, we have had a hard time getting people pretty much since I've been at the center. HPC isn't something you can go out and get a degree in. It hasn't been for since I started, and even now there are only few instances of training programs that are focused on advanced cyber infrastructure. Another issue we ran into is lack of diversity in the workforce, and we've talked about that at PERC a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure it'll get mentioned at this conference, but it's really hard to get people in that don't follow a traditional path. One of the things that we've noted is that HPC and advanced cyber infrastructure operations isn't necessarily the most glamorous of careers for somebody entering the CS field. Being an applications programmer, being a researcher, those are all kind of cool things. But doing operations for HPC, you seem to get a smaller percentage of the people in the field that would actually find that as their choice of career. And so every so often you'll find people that are biologists, astronomers, whatever, that get into operations simply because they have to. So our proposal was a variation of a standard internship program but for academia. So the idea is that we would actually do on-the-job training for the interns coming in, and that we would treat the participants as full-time paid employees. We also said that we would not use the normal limitations that you might have for a full-time staff at an academic university, somebody where you might require a 4-year degree. But we also wanted to pick up some of those people that are interested in doing operations, but haven't followed that traditional path. So the goals that we wanted to achieve were to be able to give the participants an opportunity to work with us for a semester so that they could learn about operations. We have the good fortune to be a major supercomputing facility, and we wanted to give people an experience working at one of those centers. We also wanted to sit there and bring more people into the field, especially for those that might otherwise get overlooked. Additionally, we wanted to make sure that we were being inclusive and broadening the diversity of the participants if at all possible. Sometimes those things overlap and sometimes those are distinct. We also, again, wanted to generate materials that could be disseminated and a program that potentially others could use, perhaps not at our scale, but still be useful. So we had some unofficial program goals, Don't Tell Science Foundation. But part of it is we wanted the people coming in to get hands-on experience with hardware. We feel that that's a very useful benefit of working in operations, is a feel for what will physically go where, what's useful to work with, what's not. But we also wanted to teach the interns from a more theoretical and a philosophical standpoint of why you do something and why you don't do something, and the difference between, yes, you're capable of doing that, and sure, you could do that, but should you? We see that so often is that you have a naive approach to HPC from people coming into the field. And that's not unexpected, but you want to kind of give them the experience to be less naive if they go work operationally on their own. If you're at a large institution and a center that has experience, you can kind of cover up those shortfalls because an experienced person will say, hey, maybe we shouldn't do that. Unfortunately, with the shortage of CI operators, it's entirely possible for somebody to get hired who is now the local expert, but doesn't have that background to be able to understand the consequences of some choices. Another thing we wanted to do was inform the people going through the program about their career opportunities and what it actually meant to be in CI operations. Yes, we're a real world advanced computing facility, and we have projects and we have project managers and we have deadlines and goals. And these are things that you need to kind of understand, that you have to work within a team and within a structure or hierarchy at this level. Most people, when they work in CI operations, will be subject to some form of this. And for people straight out of school or people who haven't been to school, this may be a little bit, they may have been the only person on site. So this is kind of a new exposure to them. The other thing is that interns can learn about what this kind of a career actually does, at least for the 3 months that they're there. So they have an opportunity to make a decision if this is what they really want to do going forward, or if this is something that maybe having had an exposure to it is something that they need to focus elsewhere because this isn't what they love. The other thing that for us, we have an advantage is that like any intern program, we would have potentially an opportunity to see people in action and understand whether or not they're fit for us and whether or not we'd like to try and make a hire. So we get first crack at some of the people who come through the intern program. It's not our primary motivation. And as a national center with federal funding, we're supposed to be turning out candidates that are applicable for everybody. But this is one of our small benefits that we get. Let's talk a little bit about the methods that we use for this program. I've got a couple of different sections here, but let me go over the overview first. So the pilot program was established in 2017. The initial funding was for 3 years, and we received a no-cost extension for a 4th year. I'm including pictures of the interns. Yes, they've approved the release of the pictures. I just want to give people an idea of what kind of intern groups we've gone through the program. One of the benefits that we have for operating this is that we're a well-established national supercomputing center, and we've been in operation for over 30 years. Another benefit we have for this type of a program is that we have a division into operational focus groups like storage, network, security, HPC. And so this gives us a chance for us to embed the interns with a specific focus group. So if they come and say, oh, I want to be in security, or I'd like to do storage, they have a chance to work within that group. We also operate a variety of major HPC systems. And so the interns have an opportunity to see variations on the theme of advanced cyber infrastructure, which is kind of useful. We also participate with the Exceed, and I'm going to call it Supercomputer Grid. I know somewhere out there the lead for that's flinching, but it's the national grid for the US. It organizes and gives the opportunity for participants to see a more unified interface to the national supercomputers. There's the Open Science Grid, there's Midwest Big Data Hub, there's other collaborations we do, and the students will see us interact with and try and meet user needs from those various partnerships. So we have some nice capabilities given our time. We understand advanced cyber infrastructure operations. We have the varied groups. We have a lot of capable staff. I would note, as a manager for NCSA's HPC group, at one point in time, we had 100 years of FTE experience with Linux clusters, and Linux clusters have only been around for about 20. So there's a lot of experienced people that we can call on and can be useful mentors. That doesn't mean the program isn't applicable to other people. Other people who have institutions that have groups have experience, and that can be applied no matter what the level. But because of our size and the experience, that gave us the ability to host multiple people at the same time. Pretty much about 5 per session as a max, although we've never actually hosted as many as 5. So some limitations we have for this kind of a program. We're not a separate organization. We're an institute on the campus, and we're subject to all university rules. Additionally, for an intern program, we have a large number of complex systems that are in operations at all times, and that means that we have some operational requirements we have to meet, whether or not it's a training opportunity. In the best case, we can sit there and say, look, we've got downtime, this is what we deal with it. In the worst case, it's like, we've got downtime, I don't have time to talk to you. So that's an issue we have to be cautious of. The other thing is, I'd noted, we started this program and we had a big interest in it simply because we don't have sufficient staff. That gives us the problem that while we do want to sit there and give time and mentoring to each of these people as much as possible, the interns that are participating sometimes have to work on their own for a bit. We want to give them on the job, but sometimes you have to go over and do something while the engineer is working. And sometimes you can sit side by side with them and see what they're doing. So it's kind of a balance. Our selection process, we tried, as we said, we're trying to be inclusive. We're trying to bring in people who aren't following a normal career path. So we advertise to a broad audience through flyers, emails, direct recruiting. We advertise at various events, various trade shows, big conferences. We have a website. So there's a lot of advertising trying to do to reach things. We don't necessarily contact individual institutions directly, but we will do referrals, and we do take people, we'll reach out to our colleagues and say, hey, if you know anybody, please have them apply. We keep our applications open for each session for about a month, maybe a little longer, depending on how many people have applied. And then one nice thing is that the applicants provide information and any CV through the website. And then at the end of the reporting period, that's reported to me and the co-PI for our review. So we're not necessarily getting filtered by a campus HR process at that point. Because the interns coming in are applying for a position that is considered a fellowship through a college, they're not subject to the normal employee rules. We do ask that they have at least 60 hours of college credit work, and we're really importantly focused on the fact that they want to work as CI operators. So this isn't a program for people that are looking to get more information about CI operations, although they certainly would, but what we're funded to do is produce more operators. And so the applicants need to have a focus and say, yes, I intend to work in CI operations. So we screen and interview them to pick the most appropriate candidates and then have them start as the program. So HR things for our interns. Because of the funding from the grant, the interns are provided a monthly stipend, which is sufficient to cover living expenses in the local area for the 15 to 16 weeks of the program. They're considered fellows of the college, not employees, which means that they do get a single stipend payment and they're not going through some of the employee confirmations and other things. They do receive identification as part of our organization, NCSA, and any campus IDs. We need both for various parts of our LDAP and email and ticketing systems. And so they're having the same type of identities that they would as if they were an employee. And we do expect them to work 40 hours a week and attend all group meetings. And this implies that the interns can't have a second job or be in school at the time of the internship. So this is one of the things I'll talk about later, but we are looking for people to work basically for 3 months, but the work is as an internship or as an apprentice. So for the interns themselves, once they're in the program, and they finish the first couple of weeks of training, they will be assigned a mentor or a group lead to be responsible to on a daily basis. I act as an ombudsman if they have general issues that aren't necessarily work related, but then HR issues would go to our HR department. One of the things is we try to make it such that the program is presented as if they were employees. And so they have access to events that we have for social events, training classes, one-day speakers, various things on campus. So it's pretty much as if they were employed. Oh, and for this picture, I don't know if you can see it, but they're actually standing in front of our Blue Water supercomputer. And we like this view because you've got all the racks going back. It's a nice infinity picture. So our schedule is such that we host the program twice a year. Normally it's in the fall and the spring. We tried doing a summer session one time in response to low attendance, and we found that that just was too short a period. If you're trying to do on-the-job training, you really can't collapse 16 weeks to 12 effectively. And during the summertime, we tend to be especially busy doing work off session. So that one just wasn't a good fit. Again, we had tried to get up to 5 students per session. So far, our attendance, we haven't been able to get that many people in at any one time. So our schedule breaks down. There's 1 week of initial training that covers 35 hours over 5 days. And then following that week, we give them 1 day each with one of the operational groups that they select so they can kind of see what it's like for a day. And by the end of that week, we ask them to rank their preferences for the other groups, and then we'll get them assigned to a group for the rest of the session that they'll spend time with. During the last 5 weeks of the program, we ask the interns to work on a group project together as interns. It's an operational project, maybe with limited objectives, or something that the previous interns have worked on. And then what we do is try to optimize the program for the skill sets based on which groups the interns with. So if we have a storage, a security, and say a systems engineer, we'll try to make sure that the program, the final project has the correct set of needs to fit those skills. It's about a 25% effort over the last couple of weeks, but it gives them an opportunity to do something operational and then to generate the documentation and reporting for the work they're doing as if they were doing a regular project. So here's an example schedule for that first week of training. By habit, we start on a Tuesday rather than a Monday for reasons. But basically, we go for the first 5 days with a variety of training. The one thing I'd call out on here is that the training schedules in green are actually open to all NCSA staff if they have an interest, especially for new people. For onboarding at our center, a lot of people will get a basic level of onboarding, but they may not be exposed to the in-depth workings of the various operational groups. And for the sessions in green, they can get an understanding of what, say, our IDDS group does or the AVL group by listening to the talks and having these briefings. So that's kind of an unexpected side benefit. And then at the bottom, I'll schedule the 1 day embeds for the different groups for the various attendees, and they'll have a chance to sit there and say, yes, you're going to go spend Wednesday with this group and Thursday with that group. So for the training week, we cover 3 types of informational categories. We'll do overviews and introductions, we'll do technical topics, and we'll do some professional development. The training week is designed to give the students a proper grounding, an awareness of what type of work they might be doing, as well as some technical tools to be able to do the work. We'll have a session like, say, on the Vi editor, general Linux clusters, things about professional development, as well as the overviews. This is part of the material that's been developed and is available for others. Obviously, our overviews aren't as useful for the specifics of a different site, but the format and the idea, the concepts there are kind of useful. As I said, by the second week, the students know which groups they're going to be working with. And then I will coordinate the group availability and we'll do the scheduled visits. After spending time with the group has a chance to evaluate the student. The intern has a chance to evaluate the group, and they'll generate a preference list as to which group they want to spend the rest of their time with. So far, we've been pretty fortunate in that the groups that people want are available and willing to work with the students that are interested in them. So that's been kind of nice. It keeps the intern motivation and satisfaction up to work with an area that they specifically request. So let's talk about the on-the-job training part. Our methods here are to put the interns in a group as if they were an employee and hired, but there are some limitations on that work. We're not focusing on teaching them specific HPC skill sets. These are the things that you can find information on. What we are trying to do is give them that exposure as to what kind of operational issues exist, how you deal with those, and again, that's a concept of what you can do and what you should do. We do also emphasize, again, getting them to work with cluster hardware, installation and decommissioning, because that gives them a feel for the work that they'll do that is critical for deployment and general CI operations. As we move into cloud and other types of virtual provisioning, they'll also work with that to some extent. On a day-to-day basis, they're going to attend the meetings that we have for the different groups. They're going to take on specific assigned tasks and have expected timeframes and deliverables for those tasks as part of a group member. They'll have access to group and divisional documentation that pertains to what they're doing and things they might be working on, so that they have a chance to sit there and learn more about how to do things as they have some individual time. For the on-the-job training, the limitations are that they won't have access to the facility without another engineer. So we don't ask them to go down to the facility without somebody else being there. They also aren't allowed to have root or super user access on the operational systems, and that's so that we don't have a risk of them doing something that would cause an unintended problem, but we also don't want to put a lot of responsibility on them for an operational service. It's enough for them to be able to see what's going on and not actually have a duty to fix something if it's broken. We're also not asking them to answer or respond directly to tickets. I know that some internship programs, that's what you bring people in to do. They respond to basic level tickets. For this case, because we're trying to get them on operations, we don't want them directly interacting with users when they don't have the correct knowledge base to work effectively. And we're not trying to show them how to do things at a user support level that's a level 1. The engineering and the work that we're doing is more of a level 2 type work, and so we don't want them interacting with those kind of tickets. Do we have any questions? Let me slow down for a moment. I can go pretty quick.
I don't see anything in the chat at this moment, so I think unless someone has something real quick, we are more than welcome to go ahead.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the results for our program. So as I said, we started back in 2017. We've had 6 sessions so far. The application rates have varied over time. The first couple of sessions, we had many, many applicants. As we've gone over time, the applicant for the program have dropped down considerably. We've had 20 people accepted to participate in the program. Unfortunately, during the different sessions, we've had a couple of people drop out right before the program start, and we couldn't get somebody else in. So we've had 17 interns attend and complete. The education levels that we've had have been just over 60 credit hours to people who already have their master's degree. We've had a couple of PhD applicants, but they weren't really looking for a career in operations, which is not unexpected. And we've tried to be as inclusive and diverse as we can. We've made sure that we've had at least one woman or minority per session. hopefully more than that. Like I said, I'm showing you the people who've attended so you have some awareness for there. I would say our applicant pool has been a little better in terms of women, in terms of applicants, as opposed to say a general open job search that I would have run for systems engineers. So over, for example, for a 1-year search for system engineers, I may have had 2 female applicants for the full-time position, whereas the intern program, we've had multiple women per session apply. So that's been kind of nice. And I'm happy to see that there are people who are interested in doing this. So I would note that as in a career field, there are people looking to do work in the field that maybe aren't getting considered. As I noted at the beginning, Dr. Rasu does an evaluation. She's not affiliated with the program directly. The application, the assessment that she does is completely, I'm not even in the room when they do the assessments. And then there's an annual report that covers 2 sessions, a fall and spring session, where she draws feedback from the interns on how the program itself works and how they assess their gain of knowledge. We've also made changes to the program based on feedback we've had from the evaluations. I'd say in general, the interns have been fairly happy with the program. On occasion, we've had people who've had issues with a lack of, say, I don't want to say professional development because it's not, it's more like professional networking. There may have been an expectation that we were going to take them to job fairs and try and get them jobs. And that hasn't really been a focus for the intern program. We're trying to transfer the skills so that when they go to a job fair, they can look better at it. We do ask them, we do let them know that we can give them bullet points on resumes, and we can provide references for them for future careers that they might seek. But we're not necessarily trying to sit there and say, yes, we're going to go out and get you a job. That's not necessarily a focus. Given the lack of operators, there should be plenty of positions open. If I have people from the intern program, I do try to sit there and let them know about other open positions when I can. So as a results-based measure of people who attended versus people employed in the field, we'd note that right now, 10 of the participants are actually working in cyber infrastructure post their time in the program. 3 of those people are people NCSA that ourselves hired, so that's kind of nice. We had 5 that were still finishing their academic studies or continuing for advanced studies. Excuse me. And we had 2 out of 17 that were not working in the field. I am not going to claim complete credit for that. As I said, there's anybody who wants to work in CI potentially is hireable. Going through our program makes them more useful to the people that hire them. But I am happy that we're able to sit there and see that people attending this are making a difference in the field. There's some unexpected results to the program that we observed. The training week, as we noted, we have those sessions in green, and that's really useful for NCSA employees in general who might not get exposure to what other groups are doing, and for new incoming staff so they have an awareness of the diversity of what we do. The other thing that I found was that asking the staff, the engineers, to actually do a technical talk was kind of nice to help them get some experience in doing presentations. Presenting to an audience of interns is probably the most friendly audience you will have. And it gives you a chance to hone some speaking skills, something for which our system engineers are not always known. Let's talk about, I won't say failures, but let's talk about things that didn't go as planned at first, at least. Intern is not a university pay status. And because it's not a university pay status, the university had a little bit of pushback on how we would deal with an intern. I would note that the business model for our campus is students pay to learn, not we pay students to learn. And so it took some time for us to work with the campus to say, no, there's a useful benefit to the university, even though it's not as financial as it would seem. Because we were able to do the fellowship, then the students' employment on campus is through a fellowship, and that's an accepted university practice. One of the other things we noted is that the interns, while they do work together for the first 2 weeks, are then separated and they work with their different groups. And at the end of the program, they come together for the group thing, but there's at least a 2-month period where they're pretty much by themselves with a new group. And for people coming into work experiences, for people that are just out of school, lacking some of this socialization with their peers was observed and complained about. Now, I would note that, well, this is what happens in real life as an engineer, so get used to it. But we also took the time to sit there and set up some channels for them to communicate, meeting places, virtual and real, and some other activities where they could work together during the time frame that they were embedded in group before they did the group project. It's kind of a thing that we had not thought about, and we were informed about this from the evaluations. Additionally, and I talked about this a couple of times, our application pool has declined. So at the beginning, we might get 20, 30 applicants for the 5 positions. One of the things that we hadn't clearly, correctly enunciated was the fact that it was a 40-hour work requirement and you wouldn't be able to attend class. Once we were more clear on that, that's when we first saw the applicant pool drop considerably, where people realized they just weren't a fit for the program. Again, we tried a summer session to avoid conflicts with the fall and spring sessions so that people wouldn't have to lose out on a semester of school. We just didn't feel that was enough time to give them the on-the-job training and awareness. One of the things I would note that maybe not my fault is that there's been better economic conditions. So when we started in 2017, we were just coming off a bit of a recession and people were going back to school, so there were lots of people. But since that point in time, the economy seems to have grown. Okay, we won't talk about this last year. But before that, I mean, for our previous things, people could go out and get jobs without actually having to demonstrate experience, just in education. So we've expanded the program a bit to sit there and look a little harder for people. We're trying to do some more face-to-face with other peers who may be aware of interns or people that could apply for this type of a program to help prepare them to be a better candidate for hiring. So it's one of the things we're working on. Our advertising is pretty wide already, so I don't think we can do much more advertising. Part of it is trying to find candidates and connect with them, not unlike what Susan said. So I will note about the COVID-19 effects in the program. We'd already started our spring session. The students were on campus in January of 2020. We went to a shelter-in-place order in March, middle of March. The students had already completed their first couple of weeks of training. They were already working with a group. And so everybody was moving out of the building. And so moving then to remote operations wasn't that big a disruption as it might have been if they were just starting. Because our critical and essential operations needs implied some staff had to still come in, but that interns would not come in except in the presence of an engineer. They just basically were working remotely. We were worried that working remotely wouldn't give them some of the same hands-on mentoring that you might if you were sitting side by side in a room. But at least from the evaluation reports we had, we didn't see that the interns themselves didn't report a lack or felt that they were shortchanged on it. So we're kind of hopeful. We have a fall 2020 session starting next Tuesday. We plan to do it all remotely. And then depending on how things go, with any good luck, maybe by the end of the session, we can bring them on site and have them at least do a building tour or something. So we'll have to see how that goes. You have to be hopeful and you have to be realistic, and we'll do a combination of both. So our program future, we've got an extension into 4th year. We do need to get wider exposure of our methodology and program materials to other institutions, national HPC centers, organizations that could take advantage of that. And so just by talking here today, you've helped me meet that goal. So thank you. One of the things that we're also looking is that the program itself is currently applied to people seeking a career, but we could adapt the program slightly so that we could host people who've already started a career, but are junior, and give them some operational seasoning for maybe a shorter period of time so that those concepts of operations of can and should and best practices, that could be transferable to say somebody in industry or at other institutions. So it's something for us to explore as an expansion. The other thing might be there might be some other government agencies who are interested in that aspect of it. We're not sure. That's something we're looking at. I'd like to acknowledge the support from Science Foundation. I would note the program would not be possible without our HR office making a lot of work to integrate the program with campus and campus expectations, as well as the internal organization at NCSA that does operations, our integrated cyber infrastructure, because we're basically asking them to produce course material, host interns, mentor interns. And they do get some work out of the interns, but it's not necessarily an equal balance. But since everybody knows we need more people, they've kind of been encouraged to help us train the next generation. And our evaluator, that's been very helpful. This is the contact information for our program. We have a website and Vlad and I's email. How are we doing on time? Hey, 37 minutes. I am not going to complain. That's right on time. All right, so questions.
Yeah, then this is Rafael from the USC. I have a question. So thank you for the talk. It was very nice. Very good job there. One question is, do you have any sort of tracking what happens with the students after the internships? Like, are you following or do you do any surveys?
So I'm not doing a survey, a formal survey, but I am doing longitudinal tracking by contacting them once a year to ask them, hey, are you still employed and how are things going? That's how I've been able to get the information on its success rates.
Cool, thanks.
It could maybe be a little more organized, but again, I try to contact them once a year and maintain contact to say, how are things going? I see there's a question from Stephanie. Go ahead and talk if you're able. Well, and Stephanie, if you want to just put your question in chat, we could answer it that way as well. And then I do see one question in chat that I'll answer after Stephanie. All right, so the question we have is, how would you suggest doing something like your intern program in a group that's much smaller? That's a very good question. And what I would note is that the program should be applicable to smaller groups. You would just need to limit the number of participants. Right now, we look at about 1 intern per a group of, say, 5 engineers. So if you can generate as many as 5 people, you could host an intern. If the 5 people covered a variety of disciplines, then the intern would, of course, be exposed to a variety of disciplines at maybe a wider but less deep level than you might if you had a focused, say, security group versus the, say, admins and engineers for deployment. Additionally, because we do a training program and I can leverage 10 group managers plus 10 engineers and 10 groups to generate 20 hours of presentations, you probably wouldn't be able to do a training week where you have all these different people talk. But what you could do at the beginning would then be to give them presentations that would be from other sources like us or LCI or anywhere else that you might get technical talks that were appropriate, and have them do self-review and then follow up with one of the engineers if they have questions. I think those would be the 2 ways that I would do that. And yes, there's a follow-up question, and I would be happy to share our materials with others who want to use it at their institutions. Our overviews, again, they're kind of useful if you want just the general state of what NCSA does for the group. But I think that those formats aren't bad either, because it can give you an idea of like, oh, there's the people in the group, and this is the type of things the group does, and these are the computers they work with. So there's some value in the overviews, but maybe not as much as, say, a technical talk on communication processes or the HPC in general, or Linux clusters or environment modules or whatever. Please follow up with me if you'd like access to the information. I don't have it nicely packaged and ready for delivery just yet because it varies over a year and we update it, but I'd be happy to make it available, especially as we're getting things ready for this session. So there was one earlier question, and what they had asked was, do you find that even though I get fewer applicants now, are the applicants that I get at this point more serious or a better fit for the program? And what I would say is that not necessarily. Basically, it's a smaller pool to look through, but the applicants I've gotten when I've had, say, 4 people apply have been just as serious for the ones we've accepted as the 4 people we may have pulled out of a group of 25. So I've been kind of happy about that. It does seem like the people who'd find their way to this program are serious about becoming cyber infrastructure operators in some sense, and work really hard. So we have published this as a presentation at PERC 2020, and so we put out a paper on the process. And Doug asks if we've looked to commercial and or external organizations for additional funding. So NCSA is fortunate enough to have an industry relations program. And so there's a significant number of industrial partners that do computational engineering that we have easy access to through that program. And we have presented and shown this program to them. Again, for the 4th year of operations, we're still funded by Science Foundation. So we could look to expand the program, but we're also kind of limited on our center ability to be able to support X number of people that are there as interns. So there's a little bit of limit until we can change funding models. Also, I can more accurately describe what our financial costs are to run this program to the director of our organization. And because we see benefits for ourselves, it's my hope that I can sit there and say it's going to cost this much to bring in, say, 3 interns a year, and we may get some funding through our organization to help generate people for us. I'm not sure about commercial applications generally. I'd certainly be open to it, but part of it is that as a research organization, I don't want to say I want to keep it in the academia family. That's not the point, but I would certainly try and make a preference to get people capable of supporting national open research computing as much as possible first, before you'd look at any commercial application, certification, training kind of thing, say from Google or Amazon. Wow, thank you. That was some nice questions.
Right. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. If we don't have any more questions, just to remind folks, we have 2 more presentations, breakout sessions at 4 p.m., one in track 1B and another in track 2. And I'll be moderating that one at 4. It's what is fair for research and data. And the other session is low-cost interactive access and visualization of large-scale scientific data. Ooh, okay, I better get it all. So, like I said, there's I guess Dan gave us the gift of time. We have an extra 10 minutes and then a 30-minute break in between, and our next sessions will be at 4 p.m.